Hello my dear students, I welcome you all in today's presentation. In today's presentation, we intend to discuss various engineering materials for design, their mechanical properties, their designation, and how we will select the material that we will discuss in this presentation. So let's start. We all know that selection of proper material for a machine component is very important step in the process of machine design, because if the selection is not appropriate, the component will not be able to fulfill its intended function. That's why when we have seen the flow chart of process of design, then there was this important step in which we select a suitable material for the given component based on the mechanical properties desired. For that, there are variety of engineering materials available with wide range of mechanical properties. The role of the designer is to select appropriate material for the machine component, that is, keeping in mind what are the desired mechanical properties, what are the processes available for its manufacturing, and what is the cost of material, because it is desired that first cost of material as well as its processing cost should be minimum. Then only we can say the design is fulfilling economic considerations. Before moving further, let us understand what this stress strain curve is. This curve is very important curve and it provides lots of useful information. This curve is drawn with stress on this y-axis and strain on this x-axis. For drawing this curve, this specimen is being used, which is having certain length and certain diameter. It is subject to axial pulse, which is being applied on a universal testing machine or UTM. When we apply the load and we know this initial area, this load divided by area is stress. When the load is increased, this diameter will reduce and length will increase. So change in length over original length is strain, and load over the reduced area will be stress, which since denominator is reduced, so stress will be more. So like this we can draw for particular value of stress what will be strain, and as a result we'll be able to obtain this graph. Now this graph provides lots of useful information. Let's see. The first important thing that this graph provides is proportional limit, which is this point A. This is basically stress at which stress strain curve begins to deviate from the straight line. We can see over here up to point A, this curve is exhibiting straight line behavior. That means stress is directly proportional to strain. Next, if we further increase the load, there comes the elastic limit. It is maximum stress without permanent deformation. It is somewhere in between point A and B. There lies a region in which at a certain point, if we reduce the load, the component, the specimen will regain its original size and shape. But beyond that, it will not be possible. So the limit at which permanent deformation starts is called as elastic limit. Up to elastic limit or up to proportional limit point, the ratio of stress and strain is an important property, that is modulus of elasticity. So it is stress over strain up to point A. The units are megapascal or gigapascal. If we increase the load, increase the stress beyond point A or beyond elastic limit, the permanent deformation starts. And if we now remove the load, the specimen will not regain its original shape and size. So we can say that yielding has started. This is called as yield strength or yield point strength, which is corresponding to point B. This is upper yield point and this is lower yield point. If we further increase the load, we'll get a point D, which is the point at which stress is maximum, and beyond that the failure starts. So for ductile materials, this yield point stress is important, and since this curve is for mild steel, for different materials this curve will be different. So for some of the materials like cast iron will not be having a definite yield point. So for that we'll be using ultimate strength as the design criteria. Then the area under the curve up to point E and up to the area under entire curve gives us two more informations. One is modulus of resilience and another is modulus of toughness. We can see that area under stress strain curve up to point E is called as modulus of resilience, and entire area over the under the stress strain curve, it is known as modulus of toughness. These are two important properties, two important values which defines resilience and toughness, that we'll be covering in the subsequent slides. Similarly, from the stress strain curve, we can also find the percentage elongation and percentage reduction in area. This is defined as ratio of increase in the length of gauge section of the specimen to the original gauge length. We all know that due to axial pulls, the length will increase and the area will decrease. So percentage elongation is given by final length minus initial length over initial length into 100. Similarly, we can find how much area is being reduced. It is defined as ratio of decrease in the cross-sectional area of the specimen after fracture to the original cross-sectional area. A0 is initial area, A will be final area, upon A0 into 100, that will be percentage reduction in area. Now, based on this, we can find different mechanical properties of engineering materials that has laid the foundation of defining these properties. Basically, mechanical properties describe the behavior of the material under the action of external forces. If we have chosen a material that is not having the desired mechanical properties, the component will not be able to fulfill its intended function. So properties, their significance in deciding the material is an important step. These properties usually relate to the elastic and plastic behavior of the material. Mechanical properties are of significant importance in selection of material for machine component. Let us try to define few important properties. First and foremost is strength. It is defined as ability of the material to resist external forces causing various types of stresses without rupture. Now the strength can be tensile strength if the load is of axial pulls. The strength will be compressive strength if it is axial pushes. It will be shear strength if it is twisting. So if the material is able to resist external forces, we can say it is having sufficient strength. Next comes elasticity. It is defined as the ability of the material to regain its original shape and size after deformation when the external forces are removed. Example is spring. If we apply load on a spring, it will deflect. It will either extend, it will either compress. But as soon as we remove the load, it will regain its original position. So we can say that material of spring is exhibiting property of elasticity. Now the question arises, is steel elastic? The answer is yes. Up to elastic point, it is exhibiting property of elasticity. It is elastic, but beyond elastic point, the yielding will start and it will no remain elastic beyond elastic point. So that will, if we increase the load beyond a certain point, it will not exhibit the property of elasticity. Next is the opposite of elasticity is plasticity. It is defined as ability of the material to retain the deformation produced under the load on permanent basis. Just imagine if this property would not have been there, will not be able to form components, because the formation of components, formation of sheets, drawing of wires, it is basically because of this property. Some materials exhibit this property extensively in the plastic range. So the ability of some materials to be deformed extensively in plastic range without fracture is one of the useful engineering properties of the material. Then comes stiffness. It is defined as ability of the material to resist deformation under the action of external forces. All materials deformed when stressed to a more or less extent. The material that deforms least is stiffest. We have seen one property, that is modulus of elasticity, which is nothing but a ratio of stress and strain. So to measure stiffness, this modulus, which is modulus of elasticity, is very important. If we take the example of transmission shafts, so the important property is they should not deform under the action of load. So it should have sufficient stiffness. Likewise, for different applications, we'll be requiring different materials having certain mechanical properties. We have seen the modulus of resilience. Let us try to find what this resilience is. It is defined as ability of the material to absorb energy when deformed elastically and to release this energy when unloaded. A resilient material absorbs energy within elastic range without any permanent deformation. We have seen that this property is very important for spring materials, and this is measured by a quantity called as modulus of resilience. Then there is toughness, which is ability of the material to absorb energy without fracture. In other words, it is energy for failure by fracture. This property is essential for machine components which are required to withstand impact shocks. Just imagine if a component is being subjected to impact loading and it fails to take that load and it got fractured. So we can say it is not sufficient tough, or the material is not having sufficient toughness. Tough materials have ability to bend, twist or stretch before failure takes place, and it is measured by a quantity which is termed as modulus of toughness. Then comes the property malleability, which is ability to be drawn in form of sheets, or in other words, it is ability of the material to deform to a greater extent before the sign of crack when it is subjected to compressive forces. Malleable metals can be rolled, forged, or extruded, as these processes involve shaping under compressive forces. Next is ductility, which is ability to be drawn into wires. It is defined as ability of the material to deform to a greater extent before the sign of crack when it is subjected to tensile forces. You can see the definition is almost similar, with the difference that here it is compressive forces and here it is tensile forces. Ductile materials can be formed, drawn, or bent, as these processes involve shaping under tension. There is one more important thing. All ductile materials are malleable, but converse is not true. Means the component which is having ability to be drawn, that will also be a malleable, but a malleable component may not be ductile. Ductile may not have ductile property, so the converse is not true. Then comes another important property which is opposite to ductility, which is brittleness. It is property of material which shows negligible plastic deformation before fracture takes place. If a component is not showing any plastic behavior, it suddenly fails. We can say the component is brittle. Cast iron is a perfect example of brittle material. It shows negligible deformation before fracture takes place. In ductile materials, failure takes place by yielding, which is gradual, whereas in brittle materials, failure is sudden. Next comes hardness, which is defined as resistance of the material to penetrate a permanent deformation. If we see that it is usually common that when we make indentation on certain material, if we are able to do it, then we can say it is not sufficient hard. But if we are not able to do it, we are not able to make indent, make mark on a certain component, we can say it is sufficiently hard. It is expressed in the form of an empirical number, such as real number. It can also be, there are also methods which are devised by the researchers. There is one method which is known as Rockwell hardness testing. So the hardness of the material is being represented by a empirical number. It can be a Brillouin number or Rockwell number. As hardness increases, strength also increases, and there is empirical relation between the hardness and its ultimate strength. For steels, sigma ultimate is given by 3.45 times PHN. So we can use this relation. Now let us see, we have seen in previous slides the mechanical properties of various engineering materials. Let us try to discuss few important engineering materials in brief. Most common is cast iron. It is referred to a family of materials that differ widely in their mechanical properties. We can have variety of cast iron. It is grey cast iron, it is malleable cast iron, it is white cast iron. By definition, cast iron is an alloy of iron and carbon, which is having more than 2% carbon. In addition to carbon, cast iron also contains elements such as silicon, manganese, sulfur, and phosphorus. There is basic difference between cast iron and steel. The parting line between steel and cast iron is percentage of carbon. In the steel, the carbon percentage is less than 1%, while cast iron is having 2 to 4% carbon content. Let us talk about steels. A large number of variety of steels are used for machine components. Few steels that are frequently used are plain carbon steel, pre-curtain steel, alloy steel, and cast steel. There are significant differences among these steels in terms of their chemical composition, mechanical properties, readiness to heat treatment, and application areas. This is the most common classification of plain carbon steel. Depending upon the percentage of carbon, plain carbon steel are classified into following three groups. First is low carbon steel. If the plain carbon steel is containing less than 0.3% carbon, it is called as low carbon steel. Its popular name is Myri steel. Myri steel is very soft and ductile and thus can be easily machined and welded, but it is unresponsive to heat treatment. In your first year workshop, you might have prepared jobs in welding shop, in fitting shop. So the specimen, the workpiece that you have used, that is made up of low carbon steel. Next comes medium carbon steel, which is having carbon in the range of 0.3 to 0.5%. The popular name is machinery steel. They can be machined well and their response to treatment is better than that of low carbon steel. Further, high carbon steel are steels that are having carbon more than 0.5%. They are also termed as hard steels or tool steels. Whatever tools that are being used in the workshop, be it single point cutting tool of a lathe machine or bits used in drilling machine or milling cutter, they are made up of high carbon steel. Their advantage is they respond readily to the heat treatment, they are difficult to weld, and excessive hardness is often accompanied by excessive brittleness. You might have seen that the tool usually breaks. So if it is hard, it will have excessive brittleness also. Now let us see how steels are designated. There is certain procedure that is being used to designate steels. They are designated by a group of letters or numbers indicating any one of the following properties. What is mean by that? To designate a steel, we'll use certain letters and certain numbers. So these numbers will either denote their tensile strength, their carbon content, or the composition of alloying elements. Now, the Bureau of Indian Standards has laid down certain guidelines on which we can designate the steels. Let us see. First of all, steels that are standardized on the basis of their tensile strength without detailed chemical composition are specified as. What is mean by that? If we are not going into these details, we are only interested in finding the tensile strength. So the process is symbol Fe followed by minimum tensile strength in megapascal. For example, if I designate say Fe 400, that means it is a steel and 400 is its ultimate tensile strength. If I put a word E between Fe and the numerical value, the numerical value followed by E will represent its yield strength. For example, if I say that F material is FEE 250, that means it is a steel having yield point strength as 250 megapascal. The drawback of this designation is it is merely showing the strength. It is not disclosing the percentage of carbon and percentage of alloying elements. Now let us move forward. The designation of plain carbon steel. A plain carbon steel will be designated by first a figure indicating 100 times average percentage of carbon, then a letter capital C, then a figure indicating 10 times average percentage of manganese. Means a plain carbon steel will be having certain percentage of carbon and certain percentage of manganese. For example, if the designation is 55C4, that means this 55 divided by this factor 100 will be the percentage of carbon, and this 4 divided by 10 will be the percentage of manganese. So this 55C4 will indicate a plain carbon steel with 0.55% carbon and 0.4% manganese. If you do the reverse, if you want to designate a steel with this much of carbon percentage and this much of manganese, then the average is 0.4. 0.4 multiplied by 100, here we have divided, now we'll multiply, will be the percentage of carbon, and here the average is 0.8, so 0.8 into 10 will be 8. So this steel having this composition will be designated by 40C8. So this is how plain carbon steel is designated using BIS system. Next comes unalloyed free cutting steel. The designation of unalloyed free cutting steel is similar to that of plain carbon steel with few modifications. Up to this point, these are same. It will start with a figure which will denote 100 times average percentage of carbon, then a letter C, then a figure indicating 10 times average percentage of manganese. Further, it will be followed by a symbol S, SE, TE or PE, PV. These are the alloying elements that is present and that is making the steel free cutting: sulfur, tellurium, plumbum or lead. So a figure indicating 100 times average percentage of above element that makes the steel free cutting. For example, if the steel is 25C12S14, so this 25 divided by 100 is percentage of carbon, 12 divided by 10 is percentage of manganese, and this 14 divided by 100 is percentage of sulfur. So if this S14 will not be there, this will be a plain carbon steel, but since it is a free cutting steel, so the alloying element will also be represented. We can also do the reverse. A free cutting steel with average 0.2% carbon, 1.2% manganese and 0.15% lead shall be designated as 20 because it is having 0.2%. So 0.2 into 100 is 20, 1.2 into 10 is 12 and 0.15 into 100 is 15. If we want to decompose it, we will divide. If you want to find the designation, we will multiply. So this is pretty simple. Next comes alloy steels. We have seen plain carbon steels, free cutting steels, and then we intend to discuss designation of alloy steel. Now alloy steel can be low alloy steel and high alloy steel. The dividing line is if the total percentage of alloying elements is less than 10%, it is termed as low alloy steel, and if it is more than 10%, it is high alloy steel. So there are certain rules which needs to be followed to designate these type of steels. Let us first discuss designation of low alloy steel. Here again it will start with a figure which indicates 100 times average percentage of carbon, which is similar to the case of plain carbon steel and free cutting steel. Then it will not be followed by C. Then comes chemical symbol of each alloying element followed by the figure for its average percentage contained multiplied by a factor. For convenience, all these materials are being given a multiplying factors. Like if the low alloy steel is having chromium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, silicon and tungsten, the factor is 4. If it is having any one of these, the factor is 10. And if it is having phosphorus, sulfur or nitrogen, the factor is 100. So it will have, first it will be representing the percentage of carbon and then percentage of these alloying elements based on the factors available. One more thing, since in a low alloy steel there can be number of alloying elements and manganese and silicon being most common, so to avoid confusion, manganese and silicon are included only if their percentage is more than 1%. If it is less than 1%, we usually omit these in the designation, though they may be present. Further, the chemical symbols and their figures are arranged in descending order, means the component whose percentage is higher will be placed first and then the component whose percentage is lower. Let us try to understand this by an example. If the designation is 25Cr4MO2, you might see that here is no C over here. So this is basically an alloy steel. So 25, though C is not there, but this 25 will still be representing the percentage of carbon. So 25Cr4MO2. So 25 divided by 100 is 0.25. 4, the multiplying factor for chromium is 4. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. It is having 1% chromium, and the factor for MO molybdenum is 10. So 2 divided by 10 is 0.2. So we need to remember the multiplying factors, and then we can easily convert or decode a designated steel. So it is basically having 0.25% carbon, 1% chromium and 2.2% molybdenum. Another example, 40 nickel 8 chromium 8 V2 is an alloy still having 40 divided by 100 is 0.4. Then nickel, factor for nickel and chromium is 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Again 8 divided by 4 is 2. And factor for vanadium is 10. 2 divided by 10 is 0.2. You can see that we have arranged that in descending order. We can also do the reverse, like from the given composition we can find the designation. For example, alloy steel with following composition: carbon 0.12 to 0.18. So the mean is 0.15. 0.15 into 100. Now we'll multiply this. Will be 15. So it will be 15. Silicon 0.15 to 0.35 percentage, manganese 0.4 to 0.6, and chromium 0.5 to 0.8. Now we know the rule that if percentage of manganese and silicon is less than 1%, they will not be included. So we have omitted this in the designation, and we know the factor for chromium is 4. So the average is 0.5 and 0.8, 0.65 into 4. That will be 3. So the designation will be 15Cr3. Let us take one more example. Alloy steel with following composition: carbon is 0.1 to 0.2%, silicon 0.15 to 0.35, manganese 0.6 to 1%, nickel 0.6 to 1%, and chromium 0.4 to 0.8%. Again, percentage of manganese and silicon is less than 1%. They will not be included, and this average is 16.16 into 100 is 16, so it is 16. Nickel percentage is more than chromium percentage, so nickel will come first, and the factor for nickel and chromium is both 4. So average percentage of nickel is 0.8. 0.8 into 4 is 3.2. By rounding we can put 3. For chromium it is 0.6. 0.6 into 4 is 2.4. So by rounding it is 2. So this will be designated by 16 nickel 3 chromium 2. So you can see that by knowing certain simple things, we can do the designation. We have seen this, that if the percentage of alloy elements is less than 10%, it is called as low alloy steel. Now let us see what will happen when the percentage of alloy element is more than 10%. They are termed as high alloy steel. So first of all, the designation will start with the letter X. That means if it is starting with X, it is certainly a high alloy steel, but will not leave the percentage of carbon. So immediately after X, the figures will represent 100 times average percentage of carbon, and then the chemical symbol of each alloying element followed by the figure for its average percentage contained rounded off to nearest integer. Means for designating high alloy steel, we need not remember any multiplying factors. The actual percentage will be denoted by the figure. For example, X15 Cr25 nickel 12. See, this is starting with X, that means this is a high alloy steel. So 15 immediately followed by X is 15, this is percentage of carbon. So 15 divided by 100 is 0.15, it is having 0.15% carbon. Chromium 25, it is percentage of chromium directly without any factor, without multiplying, without dividing it by anything. And nickel is 12%. We can also do the same, do the reverse. A high alloy steel having carbon 0.15 to 0.25% is mean is 0.2, 0.2 into 100 is 20. Silicon 0.15 to 0.125%. It is less than 1%, will not be included. Manganese again less than 1%, will not be included. Nickel is 1.5 to 2.5, mean is 2. Chromium 16 to 20, mean is 18. So we'll first put chromium and then nickel. So it shall be X20, chromium 18 and nickel 2. This is pretty simple. Let us try to understand one more important property, that is called as creep. We have often see that if we hinge a wire, steel wire, between 2 points, after a certain point of time it gets deformed. That is basically due to property of creep. It is defined as slow and progressive deformation of the material with time under the constant stress. It is a function of stress level and temperature. If we increase the temperature, the creep deformation is higher. This property is important when we design the blades of steam turbine and gas turbine, since they are subjected to high temperatures, so they should not deform beyond a certain level, because then they will not be able to solve the intended purpose. So design of components working at elevated temperatures is based on two criteria. First is deformation due to creep must remain within permissible limits, and second is rupture must not occur during the service life. Means they should not deform beyond a certain permissible limit and they should not fail. So to decide this, two important definitions are there. First is creep strength. It is defined as maximum stress that the material can withstand for a specified length of time without excessive deformation. And then creep rupture strength. It is the maximum stress that the material can withstand for a specified length of time without rupture. Difference क्या है? Here it is excessive deformation and here it is rupture. So accordingly it is creep strength, it is creep rupture strength. This is the curve which shows the creep behavior of materials. We can say this is first stage of creep, this is second stage, and this is third stage, and this D is the fracture point. During first stage of primary creep, slope of the curve progressively decreases with time. You can see over here, the metal strain hardens to support the external loads. In the second stage or secondary creep, the creep rate is almost constant. This stage occupies major portion of the life of component. During third stage or tertiary creep, creep rate is accelerated due to necking, and finally fracture occurs at point D. So most of the materials exhibit this type of behavior when they are subjected to constant stress over a long period of time. Now we have seen various engineering properties, and we have also seen the designation. Then comes the steps which decides how a suitable engineering material is being selected for the given function. It is one of the important steps in the process of machine design. The best material is one that serves the desired purpose at minimum cost. The factors that should be considered while selecting the material for a machine components are: first and foremost is availability. It should be easily available. There is no point in selecting a material which is rare, because if we want to go for mass production and the material is not easily available, it will not be possible. So availability of material is an important step, is an important criteria which should be kept in mind. Then comes cost. Best design is the design in which the cost of material as well as its manufacturing cost is minimum. So if we have chosen a material which is very costly, then it is not possible to produce that at mass scale. So cost of the component and its processing cost both should be minimum. Then important thing is mechanical properties. If you have chosen a material which is easily available, it is having cost also low, but it is not having desired properties, then there is no point in selecting the material. So it should have desired properties, mechanical properties, that will help the component in fulfilling its intended function. Then comes manufacturing considerations. What does that mean? The component which we have chosen, its manufacturing should be possible, one thing, and its cost of manufacturing should also be less. Often we may find that a low price material may be more expensive to machine. So the consideration of manufacturing is also an important criteria. So these criteria help in deciding or selecting a suitable material for the given application. Past experience is good guide for selection of material. However, designers should not overlook the possibility of new materials, because then only will be able to design the components that are fulfilling most of the design considerations. So in this presentation, we have discussed briefly what are various engineering materials, what are their mechanical properties, what is the significance of the mechanical properties, how the materials are designated, and what are the criteria on which materials have been selected. So I think you have understood what is being presented in this lecture. We'll come up with more topics in the coming lecture. I thank you all for your patient hearing, and see you again with a new presentation. Thanks a lot.